So I thought I'd make friends with him, thinking, I remember the first time we interacted, it was day one, I finally got a break and I was just down in the div, like leaning up against the wall and having a durry.
holding the building up.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's get off that fucking wall. Yeah, that's right.
The ex-sergeant and me just came out. I'm like, what are you leaning on that wall for, champion?
Instantly. And I was like, well, all right, I guess we're not building the pro then.
We're not mates. Can I say that's the image that I have in my head of Maz going back to ADFA was, that cool guy from Sydney leaning against the wall, just sucking darbs non-stop.
Wouldn't go as far as saying cool, but certainly I was that guy.
What
Axons Unleashed.
Guys, do it.
G'day, ladies and gents. Robbie Turner's my name. Welcome to another episode of Axons Unleashed. I'll tell you what, Luke, we've had some bloody great guests on here. I feel like I say this all the time, but we're just getting better and better and better. This is one of your really good mates. I know you're really looking forward to speaking to the great man himself, Maz.
Full disclosure, ladies and gents, this is one of my best mates, and he is probably the most...
Don't hold that against me, people.
Hang on, we haven't finished introducing you.
He's probably one of the most distinguished friends that I have. He's got an amazing story that's been an inspiration to me through my whole life. So I cannot wait to share this with you.
Now, full up front, you've got your own podcast, you've got your own story, and like as I was literally just saying off air, I love doing these podcasts whereby if you're comfortable sharing things about you that other people don't know during your normal medium. So, yeah, Maz, welcome to Axons Unleashed, buddy.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for hosting me. Hey, good to see you, mate.
Good man. Hey, tell me, and another interesting fact as well, ladies and gents, is that you're still a current serving military officer. First one we had on the podcast.
We'll be gentle, mate. Don't worry.
And interestingly, just to sort of wet the whistle there, ladies and gents, Maz has got out and got back in, and now still doing something amazing. And obviously, you've got the whole future coming your way. So yeah, there's lots and lots of layers to this story. Some of which I have a small part to play.
Yeah,
we met many years ago back in the day, so we'll talk about that soon. But yeah, I know you're going to get a lot out of this, ladies and gents, and certainly when we get to that point, you'll have an opportunity to click on Maz's podcast as well to listen to a whole bunch of stories that I haven't got to the stage of my life of telling you yet. So yeah, good on you, mate. Let's bloody get into it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, gents.
Yeah. As always, mate, we just go back to the start. Where were you born? All that sort of stuff, and just tell us the journey about. Ladies and gents, you can probably hear Maz's accent already. So, when did you come to Australia and eventually how did you, get to joining the army and all that sort of stuff? Go for it.
No, absolutely. Hey, thanks. Firstly, thanks for having me. I love it. I love what you guys do and I love the podcast. I've had a look, obviously in preparation for here. Where was I born? Geez, that's as you know, Luke, that's a very good open-ended question for me. So born and raised in Bosnia, Sarajevo. So I often say I'm a child of the Bosnian War. And I say that half tongue-in-cheek. But at the age of 10, I think, the world that I knew as a child, which was a very happy world, we lived well in Sarajevo, in an Olympic city. My parents were both highly educated and we enjoyed a kind of middle-class lifestyle, going to the coast in Croatia in summer, to the Bosnian mountains, Olympic mountains, skiing in winter. But all of that, I guess, fell apart in spring 92 when the grenades started falling. So within a few months of that, my mum, brother and I found ourselves escaping Sarajevo on the second last UN convoy to ever leave the city.
Wow.
And I say that, not to kind of glorify the story in any way, but I say it because that set the course of my life from there on.
Quick question. Hopefully it wasn't like the escape from Afghanistan where people are falling off planes and shit. Or did it probably felt like that, did it?
I mean, look, I'm not, obviously it wasn't that hectic or that intense, but it was probably... as unorganized or as maybe risky, probably not as sitting on wheel arches of planes. But the reason my dad couldn't leave, and this will give you the idea of what it was like. He was a fighting age male with an undesirable surname, right? And this is the idea of identity in Bosnia, right? That war is all about ethnicity, is all about identity. By my surname Maslic, I was cast into a particular ethnic group, even though I have zero to do with that ethnic group. So I was, because my surname is Muslim background, even though my family for generations hasn't practiced any religion at all, my father, because of that surname, most likely would have been killed at the first checkpoint leaving the city. Because we had to cross so a trip that normally takes about 4 or 5 hours to drive out into Croatia, it took us better part of a day because of all the various checkpoints that you have to go through, all the different militias, armies, paramilitaries. They all want to get their piece of you as you're going through, and of course, under those circumstances, despite the fact that this was a UN convoy, we were shot at. The UN convoy was shot at.
Yep.
And the fact that you were the UN certainly wasn't any security, which is the reason why, colloquially in Bosnia, the UN is known as the Smurfs, right?
Yeah.
Because
blue and white toys.
yeah, that's right. It's literally, and I, literally, that's what it was like. So now, I don't want to get bogged down on that, but from there, I spent 3.5 years as a refugee in Germany, which again was an entire.
So now you're like 13 years old. This is like stuff you can vividly remember.
Absolutely. I mean, I was 10 when I left, and as I came to Australia, I was about to turn 14. So,
Right.
so between 10 to 13 and a half, just shy of 14, I was in Germany, which was an entire different. I often refer to it as a different life because it was. You're just thrown in, and some of those experiences, I mean, are vividly alive with me today. You get thrown in as refos. We didn't really have. Germany did. And I love that country. I love the people. I love that language. But they did as best that they could when 100,000 Bosnians rock up at your doorstep.
Far out. It's not like a few boats that
It's not-
arrive up near Broome. This
not-
is 100,000 people.
It's not Steve and Phil rocking up on a little boat, mate. There's 100,000 people.
And this is just in the first kind of intake, right? That increased over time, and not just in Germany, but particularly Germany and Sweden, who really opened the doors. And that's, for most of you probably know anyway, that's remained part and parcel of the German/Swedish identity anyway, to really have their doors open to foreigners. So that was an interesting period because it was just mum, brother, and I. Dad was on the front lines in Bosnia for 3.5 years.
Any comms with him?
So this is I was just about to say that for the
sorry.
first year. No, absolutely. First year, none whatsoever.
How was that?
I actually don't remember it as being difficult or hard, although I know it was, but just because we were also in survival mode. We didn't speak a word of German, and I got thrown into a German school basically day 4. Go figure it out. And I was only lucky that there were other Bosnians there as well that we could kind of form our own
Little
little
gang.
clique, gang, and try and...
Did you speak English?
No.
Because I know that
obviously not.
English is
No.
a second language of Germany. Certainly are very highly...
definitely speak it highly.
A lot of it.
Yeah, so I got exposed to English in high school in Germany as I was learning German,
Of course.
as well.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So it was
mate.
so it was
We'll get-
I'm loving this already.
so it was rapid fire adjustment. But the comps with Dad, it was really funny the way it happened. And we often talk about this story. We hadn't heard literally nothing for a year. And one night I just spoke to my mum and said, Mum, I've really got a bad feeling about that something's happened to Dad. She's like, oh, shut up, just go to sleep, whatever. And I really couldn't sleep. And the next day, the phone rings, as in the landline phone rings, and it's Dad. But it's Dad through what were called radio amateurs. Right, so it was a bunch of awesome humans in Germany, Austria, Croatia, Bosnia on the front, basically in the heart of Sarajevo, with VHF radios, and just holding the Pressel switch, and you just hear the echo, Dad, 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 Dad.
Wow.
And son. Like it's been passed on through 4 sets of headsets, and that's how we talked to him the first time, which I distinctly remember as being so overwhelming, like an overwhelming sensation of holy shit, he's alive. A,
Of course.
and B,
Yeah, wow.
that is my dad, right? It's and like I wanted to know what he had experienced, what was he going through, because for him that year was highly intense, and he was literally on the front lines. And when I say front lines, perhaps to make it crystal clear to people what I mean by that is if you turn the telly on now and look at what's happening in Ukraine, that's what we're talking about, right? Like people were defending the biggest weapon Sarajevo had to defend against the 5th mightiest military in the world at the time was a police shotgun. So it was initially slaughter and defense by your bodies, literally, until they could get some weapons, smuggle weapons in, and all that sort of stuff. I'm conscious that I'm giving you a very, very long-winded answer.
No, mate. There's no program to this.
But I mean, so from there, fast forward 2.5 years later, Dad joins us as the war is I guess nearing an end. He got a approval basically to leave from the army and to sneak out of the tunnel. And for those who are not aware what I mean by the tunnel under Sarajevo, which is another piece of unique Bosnian Sarajevan history, but also perhaps world history in time, that the city was kept alive via an 800-meter tunnel that was dug underneath the runway, which was the only way things were coming in and out, because Sarajevo is a valley with 2,500 meter Olympic mountains all around it. So if you imagine, you are literally in the palm of the hand, or the city was in the palm of the hand with all these mountains, with artillery pieces, thousands of them surrounded. Sarajevo, unfortunately, holds a number of records, one of which is still, till this day, the most shelling per day of any modern battlefield or siege, which is, and of course it holds the longest siege in modern history as well, just shy of, I think 3 years, 8 months, something like that. So that's that was our kind of Germany part. Dad joined us, and my mum had the smarts to think what's next, because going back to Bosnia for us was never going to really be possible. Our house was taken over by the invading forces. Our stuff was burnt, etc. So there was really nowhere to go. One of our houses, we had a holiday house or a weekend house, as we used to call it. We saw pictures of it in Germany as the reporters were filming battlefields. Our house had only one wall standing. There was a tank parked inside where the rest of the house is, and the barrel was through the window of that one wall standing.
They were using that as a bit of camouflage.
Absolutely.
As a defensive position.
Yeah, exactly. Defensive position, literally.
Oh, that's my fucking desk. Get off it.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally what it felt like. So that was another interesting little video we saw while in Germany. Another freaky moment we had was my dad's name had popped up in the list of dead every day. We were watching the list of dead. His name had popped up. And yeah, that was obviously a scary moment, but fortunately for us, it wasn't him. It was unfortunately, I believe, a child by that name, which of course is very, very sad and tragic. But yeah, Dad joined us, and then we migrated to Australia. And
Mate,
yeah,
if I may jump in there,
yeah, please do.
What were your parents? What were their focus when they chose Australia? Like, obviously, you got an entire globe to choose from. Did they just throw a dart at the globe, or was it a much more of a deliberate approach that your parents took?
Well, you can't actually throw a dart. That's the funny thing, right? Because the passport you hold dictates your liberties in this world of ours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're lucky with the Australian passport, probably not as lucky as Germans or South Koreans, who are the two most valuable passports in the world. At the time, we entered Germany illegally, right? So we got, and I know what I'm saying publicly, but we did. My mum's uncle smuggled us in a bus and paid off the border guards. Hilarious. That it is.
It's like a foreign world.
Yeah,
this is like
it is absolutely
the Wild West.
Absolutely,
the Wild West.
And this is how this is what happens.
This is how it
right?
was.
This is there's no morality and ethics. Sorry, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just doesn't come even into play. But yeah, so there were only really 3 options. There were only 3 countries that were at that point in time taking Bosnian refugees, and that was Australia, Canada, and the US.
Yep.
We opted for Australia and the US because we had some family links or friendship networks that we could, because people had to sponsor you, which is the other part, right? They have to guarantee that they will, feed you,
of course,
clothe you,
of course,
until you land on your feet, despite the fact that you'll get, some social security, etc. And we were lucky that the process took 2.5 years to actually get accepted.
Yep.
And we got accepted on skilled migrant scheme. So my mum's a physics professor and my dad's a high level engineer.
Yep.
So they were both highly skilled migrants that, of course, Australia and the US recognised and wanted. So therefore, we got the option of both. And the reason we chose Australia, thankfully, was it had, at that point in time, marginally better social security and also allowed the migrants coming in longer paid study to learn the language.
Right.
That's what it landed on.
Yeah, wow.
And yeah, that's why we ended up in Australia, because everything
What year
changed.
are we talking now, just to situate?
October 95 is when we migrated to Australia.
Right.
And that's how we ended up with Maz.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Well, mate, I'm bloody thankful that you guys chose
too.
Australia and you guys were able to be here. So yeah, fucking hell.
A little bit of a different
That is the
upbringing.
longest story I've heard about where'd you grow up.
Not Paul
but it was
Perry, mate.
bloody the best one. Mate, I'm
Sorry, it is a long-winded
No.
answer. That's why chuckled
I say that in awe, not a complaint. Far from it.
I think it's super important for our listeners to sort of hear that, where your foundations came from, mate, because it makes up who you are and the core of the morals that you have, as an adult. So I think it's important that we gave it the time that it deserved, mate.
No, I appreciate that.
So you're like 15, 16 now?
Yeah, so 14 when I came to Australia.
14, yeah.
And then I did the usual.
Do you remember your first, where did you land and where did you live? Sydney, yeah, what a great place. So what are we talking now, 97, 98?
So 95, October 95 is when I
Yeah.
landed in, so 25th of October 1995, we landed in Australia and, that was home.
Yeah.
We stayed with those friends for the first week or so.
Where in Sydney?
We were first in Carlton, but Hurstville area, so
Yep.
kind of I guess
Southern, southwest,
Sydney.
yep.
And I ended up going to school in the Shire, which
you would have loved that, mate.
was amazing.
Long way from Sarajevo.
yeah. No, I loved it because it was me and one other guy that were the only kind of ethnic Bosnians in my grade, or I think even born outside Australia, which was a unique very rapid insight into Australia, and also helped me acclimatise very quickly. Helped me get the language, because I know a lot of certainly migrants from the Balkans went Liverpool way, where you didn't really need
That's
English.
what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, which is where my parents and with us decided, as in my older brother, we decided that no, that's not for us. We want to acclimatise as quickly as possible, get to learn the language, get to understand where we are, who we are, and start living a life.
So at this point, mate, like other than collecting languages, did you have a goal in life? Did you have any aspirations? We know where this story is going. Obviously, spoiler alert: Maz joined the military. But did you have any other aspirations outside of that?
Mate, it's a really interesting one, and you know all this, obviously.
I do.
But I was Vedran Maslic soldier from the age of 3.
Yeah.
Right. I used to walk around.
Tito.
That's right. I was, and Tito, for those who are not familiar, is not a dictator. I wasn't a dictator. All right. So despite what the textbooks tell you.
Social dictator.
But yeah, I always loved the uniform. I always had a great affinity for it. And so I always wanted to go to the army in some shape or form. But because of our experiences, understandably, my parents didn't really support that idea at all, especially my dad, who
I can get that.
Who had been wounded, who had lost his best mates, etc., in proper trench warfare. So I finished my high school and I got good enough grades to do a whole bunch of different things. Because my dad was in the kind of engineering space and he had worked for aerospace engineering in Australia, I thought, that could be all right. So I started doing aeronautical space engineering.
As you do in your spare time.
Go figure.
RT.
Absolutely not what I was designed for or meant for, despite the fact that I got in. But that lasted. That was an experiment that lasted. Well, it really lasted 2 months in my head, but on paper it was a year. After that I did a bunch of other different things, different uni degrees or whatever that I tried to dabble in, and then ultimately I said, look, I want to go to the army.
I was going to say, because we ran into each other at Duntru, and that was like 2006, 2007.
That's right.
Yep.
So we're like 10 years later. So you would have been mid-20s by then.
So I was 22, I think, when I went to ADFA. So I was one of the kind of
The old guy.
I was the old guy. The chain
and then
smoking.
25 by the time you got across to Duntroon.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that would have been. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Was it ADFA that you guys met?
Yeah,
Day
Day
one.
one ADFA.
Yeah,
Day one ADFA, mate. Yeah.
Have you listened to his podcast?
Yeah, I did, especially when he talked about Glenn Armstrong.
Yeah,
Glenn. Weapon.
So now, I thought all that was bullshit, ladies and gents, by the way, but now you're getting verified by someone else that was there, which is pretty cool.
Sergeant Armstrong, you don't forget that, man. I'll tell you that much. Especially when you first walk in, and I thought I was cocky and confident. I'd lived a bit. I thought I was 22, and there's all these kids 17, 18. I was like, fuck, all right, here we go. But no. When you saw Glenn tattooed in his polys. What is 6'3", 4", something like that?
He's a big boy.
He's a big man, chewing durries.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd make friends with him, thinking, I remember the first time we interacted, it was day one, I finally got a break and I was just down in the div, like leaning up against the wall and having a durry.
holding the building up.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's right. Get off
the
that
fucking
fucking wall. Yeah, that's right.
The ex-sergeant and me just came out. I'm like, what are you leaning on that wall for, champion?
Yeah, instantly. And I was like, whoops, all right, I guess we're not building the pool then.
We're not mates. Can I say that's the image that I have in my head of Maz going back to ADFA was, that cool guy from Sydney leaning against the wall, just sucking darbs non-stop.
Wouldn't go as far as saying cool, but certainly I was that guy.
One of the things I found interesting, Luke, that you were saying was the pulling between pillar and post between playing military and doing the studies part of it. Tell me about your experience with that.
I mean, look, I loved ADFA, right? I had a great time at ADFA. perhaps because I had already dabbled in other uni degrees, so that wasn't a threat to me. The uni piece was like, whatever, like this is I'm playing here, I love it, enjoying it. And also because I had some extra credits that I carried across.
Great.
And being a WOG, right, you try and scam whatever you can. So obvious. And
Your words, not mine.
I was just going to say that. I'm probably it's okay for me to say that. But what I did is obviously I then applied to get those credits recognised. So therefore, not only was I at for arts student, I was an at for arts student with credits, right? So I was doing, I don't know, there was one semester, I think I did one subject, so I was doing a whole bunch of other, I was studying German for fun at ANU because there were civvies and there were
Precision drill team,
which I loved. I loved precision drill. That was a phenomenal. I did, military self-defense from kind of word dot. So I did all these extra kind of curricular activities. So for me, ATFA was just it was a walk in the park. It was fun.
Had you been to Canberra before that?
Yeah, just to get my Bosnian passport renewed. That's all. But no, so never spent any time in Canberra proper until coming to ATFA.
And what about you? We spoke about the whole going over the hill. To the M in RMC is the military bit. You're not at fucking university anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it was legit, right? I mean, it was legit, right? I mean, at that point in time, that's the highlight of your life, I guess. That's all that matters at that point in time. And the pressure is amped up so hard, especially when you got somebody like Dan Fortune coming in and briefing you at ATFA still about what's going to happen in his clackers. I remember that.
Intimidating.
Yeah, pretty intimidating. And his half broken back walk, like that kind of rough, tough, hardened man kind of look. That leaves an impression, and that sets, I guess, the scene. And I think that did really set the scene for us at RMC. I mean, as much as everybody thinks there's time at RMC was the hardest. Ours was actually like a really challenging year that I.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, no, that's when you were first opening up. I was like, oh my god, I was starting to twitch. So Guns and Buns Turner's back.
Right, mate, there's one more thing I want to verify in front of a live audience. 2004, our first year at ADFA, it was the coldest fucking winter on record, wasn't it? On record.
Well, was that first year or second year? -13?
First year,
mate,
yeah.
Was it? I do distinctly remember having to shave in that. Because of course, you'll lose the war if you don't shave.
Exactly.
-14, 13 degrees in fucking Majura. And hey, again, this is not a problem a lot of the 17 and 18-year-olds had. I was 22.
Yeah.
And Maz was shaving twice a day out.
I got in trouble for the 9 o'clock shadow.
the 9 a.m. shadow.
I did, right, by Birchie, who forced me to shave, twice, a couple of times. These youngins didn't really understand the issue with that. Yeah.
Mate, and when you went over to Duntroon, I recollect that you did quite well. What was your position in the Corps and that sort of stuff?
As in across mate, I don't know.
When you're doing shit for real.
Yeah, so second class, I was, mate, I don't remember whatever is the ANCO or whatever. Yep. I can't remember what it was, but I was kind of, I don't know.
A big deal.
It didn't mean shit, right, in the grand scheme of things. But apparently I was meant to do stuff to look after the, kind of core staff cadets. But because you're second class, none of that really mattered.
Yep.
So it was just a prestigious position because of my, I guess, ATFA academic performance.
Yeah.
Didn't really reflect anything on, my actual future in the army or anything like that.
Yeah,
but it just meant that we didn't have room inspections, which was pretty cool. I could sleep in and miss a bunch of parades that others couldn't. That's about it, really.
So for those that are listening out there, ladies and gents, inside of the Royal Military College, there's a rank structure, an NCO, non-commissioned officer rank structure that's applied to the Corps of Staff Cadets, and so it's kind of like an internal moderation or mediation of your own performance, your own behaviour and stuff like that. That's obviously closely monitored by the staff as well. They, keep an eye on it, so it's not Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
Not totally Lord of the Flies anyway.
Not totally, yeah.
Because obviously the real military doesn't just have the officer corps.
Of course.
The real military's got the OR corps that you guys need to have a bit of exposure to.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Dan Fortune because he's the one that pulled me aside. He goes, right, you're now running the leadership training. You're a commando officer. Let's create a Shaggy Ridge that's just going to put these little... So he said something like, let's put these little pricks through the fucking worst time of their life.
And he fucking did.
He might not have said that exactly, but that's what I got from it anyway. I was like, challenge accepted, boss. Let's fucking do it.
Yeah. I mean, look, what in our Shaggy Ridge, So we had 50% of the class miss at least one day at the ROP because they were getting bagged because they were IV'd. We had 4 shoulder dislocations, a bunch of knee dislocations. One guy went blind. Another guy had flown out because of his kidneys stopped working.
It was hard.
It was hard.
It was fucking
hard.
hard.
And I do remember Dan Fortune even briefing us beforehand. If you think you've got an injury, what I consider an injury is a bone protruding and
Through
blood
the
spurting
skin.
out.
Right.
And that's kind of the image I was like, okay,
Righto.
mate. This is
He told me to cook that barbecue.
Yeah.
And he told me to
Did
turn
not
those
do
that was
sausages.
you. That was you.
I made up the bit about walking around asking what sauce you wanted on me.
Mate, I've got a question for you, RT. Did Dan Fortune drink a lot of coffee?
I can't remember.
Okay, the reason I ask is as the Corps of Staff Cadets, we thought that he just ran on caffeine and hate. That's what that body was functioning on.
And on PSYOPs, psychological operations. I don't know if you obviously know this yourself, and I respect Dan a lot, and we've been in touch recently. He's been supporting my podcast. He's great. But I remember going in for what I was told by the AG is, mate, you're going in for a positive tea and coffee or whatever, positive talk. I was like, fuck, what have I done? I didn't do anything positive. Like, what? I don't want to go. He's like, no, mate, you're going in. It's like, fuck, I got marched in. And the AG goes, mate, don't look at him. I'm like, what? Don't look at him. Look at the portrait above his head. Fucking what? And of course, you do that. And I walked in and I'm obviously shitting myself because there's Dan Fortune sitting at a big desk and there's a portrait of him above him and you got to stare at the portrait while he's addressing you. And this was apparently a positive talk, which very rapidly turned, because of my answers were shit and I didn't know what I was, I was baffled. It very rapidly turned into a negative talk, right? And there's a very fine line between those, with him, as you probably know fully well. But at some point, he then ended up inviting me to look at him, which I was told later is the kind of okay, this is where the negative turns into the positive, apparently, and that's the only distinguishing feature that you're now looking at him in his eyes as opposed to his portrait. But everything else is the same.
But here's the thing, he was genuinely a fucking hard leader, a tough leader that got the best out of us in the environment that we were, the focused outcomes for the environment. 100%. There's a lesson in that you don't necessarily have to be everybody's friend all of the time.
100%.
Like all of us sit here with endearing words for a guy of that stature and that performance and stuff like that.
I assure you, none of the instructors pulled the piss out of him or fucking what he said to the letter happened without fucking question.
No doubt.
Even though there was some robust discussion sometimes, and certainly when we were creating that activity, I'm like, look, what about this? He goes, might not work here, might not work there. I'm like, well, what do we do this? So he was very collaborative behind closed doors, but when it was game face on. It was fucking on, for sure.
And it is a game face. I mean,
it's interesting, like me sitting here listening to you talk that story about portrait, looking me in the eyes, I'm like, that's not a big a deal. But back then,
mate,
that cocoon, with that pressure, I fully understand.
I laid an egg in my undies when I went to speak to him, mate, I'm telling you.
Well, just like weeks before, in our last exercise, whatever it was, the urban ops, whatever, Tincan Bay, that was our last before graduation. I fucked up royally, right? And he chewed me out like properly, but then he finished the chewing up. You will graduate, but, and I was like,
nothing else matters after that.
That's cool. Because I thought this is it, I'm like, because I'd briefed some general or something, and it made him look bad or whatever, and it was, it was all bad, unintentionally, of course. But when he said those words, you will graduate, but all right.
I also love hearing stories like this because it's comforting for me to know, because when you go there as an instructor, you put your heart and soul into making sure you can train people, because it is Australia's premier leadership institution. And the fact that all of you were taking it so seriously it's heartwarming to hear. You don't want to not go through that. You don't want to fail. You don't want to get backlash. You don't you're there because you want to be an officer in the Australian Army, which is amazing. What did you like most about Duntroon, though, just quickly, and then let's move on to the next bit.
What did I like most about Duntroon? I mean, there's absolutely, my best friends, without a doubt, are my Duntroon
mateship.
There's just nothing that even comes. I mean, there is something that comes close, and that is my Bosnian group in Sydney, which are family, just like my Duntroon group as family, because we went through something so hard, so forging together, like my Bosnian group. There's 4 or 5 of them. We've experienced something arduous and hard together. We all came around the same time and went through similar experiences, so we were there for each other, and that we pulled each other through those hard days. And I think that's very similar to the kind of Duntroon kind of group, and that's and I think that I think that you can probably relate to that because our group of mates is very much the kind of that core group of mates. That
speaking of core, which one did you go to afterwards? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm intelligence corps. And I wanted to do that. So when I joined, I wanted to do intelligence. And I'm not even sure if I should be talking about this, but whatever. So between the three of us,
there's no one else here. No one else. Dubs is over there on his phone. He's not listening. There's only the three of us.
I was human intelligence, and I wanted when I was applying at recruitment, I wrote to put in 3 preferences. I was like human, and the Navy PO, that was there, he just chuckled. He goes, "Mate, you can't do it." I was like, "Well, that's what I'm doing."
That's what I'm doing.
And he goes, "Fuck, fair call." So he took it and he laughed. But I ended up, getting intelligence corps. But because of intelligence, you have to go and do a year and a half elsewhere as your kind of Reggie time, which for me, I was blessed to go to 51st Battalion Far North Queensland Regiment.
Fucking stand fast.
Right up in Weeper.
Amazing. The dogs of Weeper.
Right.
So I was in Weeper, which was an incredible experience. Only 200k south of the tip of Australia.
I've been up to Weaver.
Yeah, amazing.
It's in the middle of fucking nowhere. And you are
incredible.
You're up north.
Yeah.
You just know, don't you?
Yeah, it was amazing. And 80% of our soldiers were black fellas, local Indigenes, and I say that knowing how sensitive the world is to serving black fella, but I had a rapid education by my soldiers. One in particular, Jimmy, he's like, "Boss, I'm a black fella. You're a white fella." Like,
yeah,
don't make a deal of it.
It's the obvious. It's not. Yeah,
it's but it was hilarious. But it was really interesting for me to coming down like from Sydney and being kind of deeply sensitized to this kind of racial talking, etc. I was like, wow, I've got to be really careful and sensitive. And then I ended up serving as the cultural advisor during one of the Army Aboriginal Community Assistance programs that was happening very close to Weipa in a place called Mapoon. So I had to deliver briefs for all these Sydney guys, engineering guys that were coming up. And that's the first thing I would do, "G'day guys, I'm Maz, blah, blah, and these guys here, these black fellas you see up the front, they are soldiers, Jimmy, blah, blah, blah." And you can see people just go, "Oh, did he just say
what?
The B word?"
Yeah.
And that was a good way to kind of open people's eyes to go, "Hold on, guys, just like be human."
Yeah.
Like understand that there is, there's these are real people.
Yeah.
They have real feelings, real emotions. You don't need to paint them with some certain brush of some cultural war identity that you're fighting over there.
They're our soldiers.
They don't care. That's right.
They're our
soldiers.
Yeah.
And they are some of the best soldiers I've seen as far as their intuitive understanding and connection to land, which is why they serve, because they have a deep affinity for a land and country, and having seen some of having been exposed to some welcome to country initiations and ceremonies. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it. That was probably some of the most powerful experiences I've had. Was that 18 months because we spent bulk of those 18 months living out in the communities and kind of driving across Cape York, looking for illegal landing sites and cache sites and that sort of stuff.
That's a very different experience as a first and second year LT lieutenant.
And for me, it was perfect because I was going to Humint. So this was the total opposite of regimented, because our uniform was cut off campans. That Merle, our clerk, who's a legend, we called Mum. She'd cut them and sew them up for us. Crocs and our unit T-shirt. That was our uniform.
Beautiful.
Right?
Excellent.
Towing a 4.4 metre Quintrex, the back of our Land Rovers, to go exploring the local riverines.
Estuaries,
And so, mate, where'd you? So you've done your Reggie time. You've got to come back to real army now, per se. What next?
Did you go to Dincy?
Yeah, I did. So I ended up going to Dincy or DSI now, Defence School Intelligence, and did my regimental officers basic course.
How was that? Is that because that's not just human?
Hard.
That would have been
that
would have been intelligence principles in general.
That's right. That's the intelligence officer. Everybody has to do that. Human came afterwards. But yeah, that's hard. It's a hard course. I'm not going to lie. And it needs to be hard because you need to have the ability to remain calm when so many different feeds are coming in, and you need to. Forewarned, forearmed, right? Is the motto of the intelligence corps. You need to do all the hard work, thinking about what's happening, the possible, or the intent that the enemy might have to allow the commander to make a decision to win the battle, right? Whichever way. So there's a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of intelligence officers, and we all know when you got a good one,
Yep.
And of course, we all know when you have a bad one.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a lot of pressure at the school, rightly, to expose you to as much, to teach you as much, to put you under as much pressure and test you in your planning and provision of your intelligence planning and monitoring of the battle space, which I think now is back to IPB, not MB. But so it was hard, but it was good.
Can you just talk about the whole process of numerous feeds, information, fusing, and then int reports? Like, just summarize that for us.
Yeah. Okay. So in short, I mean, you have these kind of sources and agencies, right? There are all these kind of collectors that are existing out, whether it's signals intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, whatever, right? There's all these collectors out there. Some of them do their own analysis and processing and provide you a report that has some analysis in it, but others provide you just the raw information. And you are in the middle as part of the intelligence cell, I guess, receiving all of these different reports from different, completely different domains, different streams. And your job is to look at that information and then analyze it and make an assessment based on evidence and fact to inform the commander.
Try and fuse it all together.
Fuse it all, right? That's the kind of whole fusion piece to try and create as cohesive a picture as you possibly can of what's happening out there. Now, that is so freaking hard for a multitude of reasons. And as I've come to learn, post my deployments and post, further study, there's so many things that we cannot know, right? So it's not just it's your fault for not knowing, but there are just things that it's impossible for you to know about a local context, about the architecture of a particular society.
Pillars of power
that
we don't necessarily appreciate.
That we just don't at all get, how exactly how power flows, how money flows in a conflict setting.
Money, drugs, weapons.
Exactly, all of these things. And Afghanistan proved to be a prime example of how little...
Bomb residue, all that stuff.
Exactly, all of that. And you've got to try and make the best of a very, very difficult and uncertain scenario to try and reduce the uncertainty for those making the decisions. So that's roughly, broadly how it works.
Very, very important.
And you deployed... So you've got these skill sets that you've just tucked in your back pocket to be able to take out and explore in the real army. You deployed pretty soon after that, if I remember. Is that?
Yeah. So I was, I guess, lucky in that instance because we all wanted to deploy, I guess, because the wars were on. So I deployed. So what time? What was that? So I did 2000. Yeah. So within a year, within 7 months actually of marching into one battalion, one company, I deployed to Afghanistan as an officer in command of field human teams, which of course is it's the pinnacle of that job for us, and I was very, very grateful that I had a commander who recognised and trusted me to actually go and do the job. It was Nick Rose, if he's listening. He remains a legend in the Corps, not just for me, but for many of us.
I know him. He's a real good bloke.
Yeah, just a legend and a jet and a.
He believes. He knows, exactly. And he believes.
That's right.
It's a bit like us with the marketing team, Dubs. Like you heard me say the other day. A lot of business owners will just put the marketing team over in the corner, like a lot of commanders used to do to the int people, put them over in the corner and only come and go, why isn't this fucking working when they haven't been involved in the first place?
Yeah.
But if you've got a commander that believes the value of marketing, the belief, like for us, like int drives ops in an army perspective.
Yep.
The marketing and the research we do and the locations we go to drive the property operations we do. So I have the exact same.
Absolutely, that's how it should be. And it's not you're spot on. I mean, and you know this far better than I do, but it's certainly not the opinion that is always the one that commanders hold. Like you said, int can exist, and this is why the intelligence officer matters, because there are many intelligence officers who just aren't personable, because that's not what you're there for. You're not there to be a
charismatic, outgoing.
You're
analyze.
That's right. So there are some that are, or many even that are perhaps introverts or just don't want to engage when they don't. But you need to, and I think that's what the school does very well, is force you to get out of your shell and really start engaging into proactively. You need to shape the commander to want intelligence. Rather than waiting for the commander to ask.
We were really lucky at SOCOM to have some in-corps guys that did have a lot of personality, and they were quite charismatic, because ultimately the fusing and the analysis and the reports that had a probability and a likelihood attached to it. So like, hey, we think like the whole juice is worth the squeeze. We have a high probability there's going to be X, Y, and Z occur here. From then, obviously, the commander takes that information, go, right, that's a decision tool. Do we now spin up an operation to go and deal with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
If you can't communicate that clearly, then everyone's just fucking sitting behind the wire, eating fucking lobster and going to the gym.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the SOTG.
And how was that trip for you, mate? Like overall?
I mean, incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing, because you are so tapped into. So we had, and I don't know how much I can talk about it on here, obviously, but we had teams supporting both the SOTG and MTF intimately in everything they did. And, as the cliche goes that nothing in theatre happened without human. SIGINTers will probably tell you otherwise, but that's the kind of...
The little
but they all, for me as an operator, they all feed
together.
the same
Right.
They feed the complete picture.
That's right.
Exactly.
So the hours you're working is insane. I mean, we were putting out up to 60 reports a day at times, which obviously as the OIC you have to read every one of them, vet every one of them, correct every one of them, make sure that they're cross-referenced properly to different things and that actually make sense, that your grading that you're giving it or veracity of that report that you're giving it the due diligence, because hey, fuck, people will die based on that. That's the reality of it, and people have died based on that. And that's a responsibility that's in our case carried mostly by the operator, but owned by the OIC, right? Because you need to own it as the commander. You own that report as much as the operator carries the burden of making that assessment, making the analysis, and collecting that information. So it was a high intensity deployment, certainly for me. Which of course was dotted with a whole bunch of interesting moments over that 6.
But secretly, I'll bet you were loving it.
Absolutely,
that's what you were born to do.
That's right.
It's like you're playing first grade, mate.
Absolutely.
Crack on.
Absolutely, and absolutely right. And because you're pinging so high as well. I mean, because it's so alive, right? All your senses are alive. You every day matters, and nothing else matters in that instance, because right now what you're doing is either helping keep people alive or helping those who are tasked with removing threats, do that in the most appropriate way, whatever that means, right? And this is then something that, of course, one on reflection starts considering, especially when you're talking about Afghanistan, right? This is something I address in my podcast quite a lot, is that war. I often say on the podcast, we never fought the war we thought we fought. And this is some of my own lessons later on about misunderstanding, and I put myself in this, misunderstanding the battle space, misunderstanding the ecosystem that is Afghanistan. And of course, we'd all fully well know how that ultimately unfolded.
Yeah. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, mate. I have reflected, and I'd still do it frequently now, and I'm sure you will, Luke, over the coming years. You'll deal with circumstances in your life now with much more context and experience and better people around you, and you go back and go, oh, that something similar like that happened to me in the military, and I addressed it a completely different way, and I feel like a dickhead for it. It's totally normal. It's fucking life. It's experience. It's evolution.
That's right. Growth.
Of course.
I'm not saying I don't dwell on things. I absolutely do. I dwell on it to try and pick out the lessons.
That's right.
So if and when that occurs to me again, I'm not that same dickhead.
Yeah. And you are good at that, mate. You are
good at being a dickhead. That too.
No, about learning lessons. You've got a very, very quick learning loop.
Got to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Got to. So, mate, Maz, back to you, mate. Like we come back, you settle back in, smooth settle back in or bumpy settle back in, but you settle back in nonetheless. And then what happens? So
I was then again lucky to deploy in a different role to East Timor, and I was there for just shy of a year, which was an amazing experience. And this is where you and I got to hang out. We shared the bunk beds, which was the best welcoming I had landing to theatre. And there's Luke, who'd already organised our little chalet.
I'm secretly jealous, and I wasn't even there.
It was amazing. He'd flogged the TV from somewhere.
I stole everything that wasn't pinned down.
Reallocated.
That's right. Repurposed. But we had absolutely the best pad in Camp Phoenix, without a doubt. And it was a well-kept secret. There was a PlayStation in there, big TV, basically a full kitchenette. He had done well as a logistics officer. He's done his job sourcing everything.
We won't comment on the amount of alcohol either, by the
way. No.
Well, actually, there was no piss. There was actually. I don't care about.
We'll talk about that later.
No, I don't care about saying it now. There wasn't.
No, there wasn't. There really wasn't. No, there wasn't. There was. What was that? tour de force. We got in trouble. We got in trouble.
Yeah, we were stop-outs, dirty stop-outs, basically.
Yeah,
and Maz and I, the young retrobates that we were as young captains, getting ourselves into strife.
Well, we were showing the lovely ladies that had come to entertain the force just the sights of Timor.
Yeah, hospitality, keeping up international relations, I call it.
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah. And we got chastised for it, and we lost a couple of weeks' pay for that.
Oh, I don't know, mate. I don't know. I can't remember. Minor details. I was more focused on how much fun we had.
No, but that was a long trip for me. I think I was one of the last people on that deployment. We kind of closed it down, and then got back.
There was also something else pretty significant that happened while you were over in Timor, mate.
Well, that's true.
If I do recollect.
Yeah, of course. We didn't happen in Timor, of course.
No.
But I met my other half. So my partner in life, Essen. She was an analyst working for one of the strategic agencies. So in some weird twist of fate, she was kind of my boss in a way.
Still is.
Yeah. So she set the tone early.
I've only got one boss.
she anchored early. That's all I can say. So we professionally got to know each other there. She then returned to Australia. I then went home on my first ROCL, relief out of country leave or whatever. That's when we kind of something happened and we kind of all got a little bit serious to the point where when I went back. And went back on my second ROCL, she had moved in into the apartment that I was sharing with this guy. So when I came home from Timor, there's this guy at my house, and now my new missus.
We just picked Timor up and moved it back
literally.
into Australia.
Yeah, we just needed a ping pong table, and it was.
When you know it's a good thing, mate, just crack on.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was about, if I remember rightly, mate, and sorry for the leading the question specifically, but that was about the time where you started making the decisions around were you in the right role, and did we all become veterans one day, and two of us sitting here now. But that was about that point where you said, is this the rest of the life for me?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I knew the writing was on. I mean, put it this way, man, I was just tired. I was flogged. Those 4 years at the company were extremely busy, and most people don't even know this, but one company, and I'll say this publicly, was the most deployed unit in the Australian Defence Force.
Yeah.
More so than SOCOM, right? Which most people don't know, because we're one company and undermanned at any point in time, or undermanned at any point in time. So we had, it was tri-service by that stage to try and fill the gaps, and people were just going constantly, right? So not only were you deploying, but then you had to do all your courses, and all the human courses are long courses, which of course takes you out of, and intense courses as well. So by that stage, when I came back from Timor, I was done. It was a busy year, finishing off that year as well. I was trying to finish off a master's. Then I ended up in a busy role as well, acting as the OC of the company for the last bit of that year. And I was just done. I just needed a break. And there were a whole bunch of other things, but that was kind of what inspired me to pop smoke. And Essen and I decided, well, let's do. She had hung up her boots, so to speak. We decided to do something completely random, something to create as big a separation as possible. So we picked up from Brisbane and flew to Bosnia to open the country's first cross-fit gym.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so don't hold that against me. I've since left the cult. I still dabble.
I was going to say that was obviously a while ago.
Yeah, because you're only just hearing about it. But that was then another experience. For me, it was a coming home in many ways.
Of course, it would have been so good. I love that.
Yeah, do some personal healing and reconnecting, and also doing something positive. We established as a not-for-profit, so we did a whole bunch of charity work for kids with cancer, kids with autism, kids without parents. We supported refugee crisis, the floods in Bosnia.
Was that your first time you went back there since?
I had been back once. In fact, I went back on ROCL when I was in Afghan.
Okay.
Which was sorry, I've been back twice. First time was at the end of first year ADFA, and that was the first time back. But then second time was in Afghan, and this was then the third time, I guess, for any longer period than a week or two.
Was it good to go back each time and see that it had progressed to some sort of normality? Can I use those terms?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Gotten better?
Yes, it has gotten better, but superficially so. So for the first two times, it looked better. But for the third time, we went there and started a business or a company, and then you become a local again, and you start seeing below the surface of the turmoil that exists and the continuous tensions. And Bosnia is now more divided than it was before the war.
Wow.
It's, even today, right now, it's at the brink of, violence can erupt at any moment because of all the other competing geopolitical interests that are pushing those buttons. But nonetheless, it remains a region that is
volatile area.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Is that part of the reason why you didn't stay there long?
No,
Surely you didn't want to get caught in another war.
No, it wasn't even that.
Where you didn't have your own weapon.
Well, there is that, but also I wasn't, and I'm conscious of what this is going to sound like, but I'll put it into context. I wasn't from there anymore.
Love that.
As in, I'm there from my heart and soul. I love the place. I love the people. I love the country. I love my history, my past, my ancestry, etc. But I had changed. Right, I had seen other parts of the world. I had witnessed other things. There were other things that were urging me forward. This was I wanted to give back something to Bosnia, something positive, and our gym was that. We, and this is a powerful story in itself. We opened the gym in the old Olympic Stadium, so we refurbished the whole. It was a big project. It took us 9 months to open, to basically rebuild part of the stadium, and to this day, I don't know any other gym, let alone CrossFit gym, that has its own running track inside an Olympic stadium with the Olympic cauldron still standing above you. Right?
Wow, that's pretty cool.
You go and do a workout like Murph, right, which has got a lot of kind of running around. You run outside into a stadium. You're in a stadium with a cauldron there. That's powerful. The colours we used were the colours of rebirth, orange. Our logo was the resistance fist holding a kettlebell, which was resistance in a number of
different
layers.
yes,
First,
understood.
resistance in firstly in the kind of fitness piece, but also perhaps in the Bosnian context, most relevant, resistance to the pressures of segregation, divisions that exist in that country. So we taught classes in English, Bosnian, German, Turkish. We had 9 flags of different nations that were represented at the gym. We had all Bosnian ethnicities represented. We had coaches that we had trained that were all Bosnian ethnicities. So there was Serb, a Croat, another like myself, a Bosniak, a Muslim, and perhaps the most powerful symbolic image that still remains with me today, and I think with many who were with us on that journey around those years, we had arranged a blood drive to donate blood as a gym, as a club. So people were coming in on a Saturday morning, do a hard workout, and then off to the side of the gym floor, there were a couple of beds lined up, and the blood bank guys had rocked up, give a few snacks, and go and give your blood, give your blood pumped. And perhaps one of the biggest, strongest images that I still hold from those days is we had a couple of coaches of different ethnicities sitting next to each other and both bleeding red. Right? And that was an image, a symbolic image for a place like Bosnia that went viral, if one can use that term, in Bosnia in 2015 at this point in time, because it was a powerful image of this unity that exists within a club so small, but that is surrounded by these structural divisions and hatred. So yeah, it was a really powerful project for my own personal healing, I think, but also for those who were part of it.
Tell me the club still exists.
It does.
God,
Yeah,
thank
that's
God.
awesome.
I was
That's
like,
awesome.
please tell me this club still exists.
It does, and we handed it over to another guy who had similar vision that we did, and he then since has handed it over to another girl who definitely had the same vision as us. So she's bringing back in the whole charity work. She's brought the old logo back. She's really
So
it's giving it a second proper life.
I don't know if we've got the reach to hit Bosnia, but just in case we do, mate, what was the name of the gym?
CrossFit Sarajevo.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
It is the first official CrossFit gym in Bosnia, and now there are 6 or 7, I believe, and some of our old coaches had then since gone and opened their own.
You're the OG, mate.
Well, it's funny because at that time we kind of cared about CrossFit. So you went to CrossFit Games or CrossFit Open, which is basically the global competition where everybody does certain workouts, and then the fittest in a country, they get a special T-shirt from the CrossFit headquarters. So Essen and I both have fittest in country diplomas. That we were the fittest in Bosnia with a T-shirt. Never mind the fact that only 3 of us doing it.
Doesn't matter, mate.
Doesn't matter.
I'm interested in it. I'm sure other people are that are listening. Dubs, can you just make a mental note to put CrossFit Sarajevo website, if you've got one on there, so people can see the images and see the resistance, etc., etc. I'd love to see it as well.
Yeah,
mate.
absolutely. It's backwards. So the logo had changed after the guy that we handed over. He changed the logo, but now it's back to the original logo, to the original kind of idea, spirit, and the kind of charity work that was part of it.
So a couple of years doing burpees and kips and the like, mate, and then you decided you didn't have enough fucking languages under your belt. What was next?
Well, funny you should ask that. Sweden. That was a throw in a dart, right?
Yeah.
Because where do we want to go next? Because I wanted to study some more. So I have some family in Sweden who escaped Sarajevo like we did. My first cousins, my dearest cousins. So we thought, let's go to Sweden. So we moved to Sweden, kind of uplifted from Bosnia, kind of clean slate. I enrolled in uni, did a couple of degrees in parallel, which was really interesting because I wanted to study, firstly, what we had done in Bosnia. So this kind of building of communities, how communities are created, and mainly through communication. So I studied a master's in communication with a focus on this kind of interpersonal communication, which is very much human anyway. And then I did a conflict resolution master's as well, which was to try and understand how societies fall apart and how they come back together. Because I really ultimately wanted to, and again, this is perhaps, evident to some, but this is the red thread through my life is, conflict has been somehow in and around my life, and peacemaking has, as a result, has also been part of my life, which is what I wanted to do afterwards. So that was 2.5 years in Sweden, nearly 3 actually. And as I graduated, I got a job to go to Iraq as a country manager for a British company. To be there to head up their consultancy over there, which was it was an eye-opening project or experience, because not only had I already had exposure to the, as it's well known, the military industrial complex, I was now becoming deeply initiated and immersed in the post-violent conflict industrial complex. And the amount of money that's poured into the post-violent conflict industries, and therefore the incentives that exist to drive people to do some of the most unethical things I've seen, the mind just boggles. So that was again another short 8-month chapter in my life.
Geez, you've done a lot, and we're not finished yet.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure everyone's getting tired. So
with another 5 or 6 minutes to go, I'm keen on knowing what happened in your life to say, I'm going back to the army. Because this is an unusual part of anyone we've had on the podcast so far.
Yeah. So after Iraq, I was asked to go back to Sweden to lecture at my old university, which I'm very grateful for, because then I got to lecture interpersonal and intercultural communication, which is absolutely one of the fields that I really believe in and absolutely appreciate and take great joy.
Not speaking English, so I take it.
No, this is in English. It's
right.
an international master's in English.
Okay, right.
But I had picked up Swedish along the way, because Swedish is quite similar to German, so one can get by.
Sure.
You can. So after about 1.5 years of that, we decided to come back to Australia to welcome the birth of our firstborn, Lara. And very soon after that, a good mate of ours, Hugh Cadies, he said, "Hey Maz, I'm carrying a vacancy up at the School of Intelligence. What are you doing at the moment?" And COVID had just kicked off, and I was a bit of turmoil anyway. I was started doing a business with one of our other mates, Ben Grumley, and we it was all a bit in the flux. I was like, "Oh mate, I'm open to suggestions." He goes, "Well, I need somebody to update our teaching on this kind of culture stuff," and that was it. I was sold. Got back in a heartbeat, basically, and
back in full time.
Back in full time, straight up.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, nah, because he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse, basically.
Yeah.
Godfather like. So it was to come back in and teach interpersonal communication, intercultural communication.
Stuff that you loved, stuff that you believed in.
Absolutely, and that I had now equipped myself with a bit more from the kind of learning and studying I'd done and teaching. So it was for me it blended really nicely. Got me up to the Goldie as well. I was then, since then, that was mid-2020. I basically continued teaching, even though I'm no longer part of the school, but I continued teaching there on a bunch of courses on the interpersonal, intercultural communication stuff. I got involved with a kind of defence-wide course on culture. Then I was part of the Army Knowledge Centre, so helping with some of our doctrine, and it probably won't come as a surprise to people that I'm deeply interested in ethics, culture and character. So those were some of those things that I'm involved in. And then, just because, I had the time and the opportunity, I put in a submission to the Chief of Defence Force Fellowship to start a PhD, and for some reason it got up. So this year I'm the Chief of Defence Force Fellow, and I've just started my PhD not long ago to study military ethics and with Ned Dobosh and Dean Peter Baker.
Wow. Bloody hell. I wasn't expecting that.
So it's a whirlwind tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps the only other relevant point that to I guess round it off is the podcast and how that came into being is because the podcast, as I got back into Army, I recognised that there were a lot of young people now who hadn't deployed, hadn't experienced war, didn't have a really idea of what war is like, but were eager and gung-ho to go, and I totally understand that. But knowing what I know, knowing what I've seen, I wanted to lift the lid on the true raw nature of war, and that's why I started the Voices of War. And through the podcast, so the kind of the catch cry of the podcast is to scratch below the simple narratives of war through the voices of those who understand its complexities. So I speak to refugees, generals, soldiers, academics, peacemakers, as in negotiators, peace negotiators, military ethicists, etc., to try and provide different lenses to the experience of war, whether you be a fighter, whether you be a victim of war, whether you be just a bystander and observer, or whether you be a researcher of war. So that's kind of been the journey over the last 2 years now.
Interested in your thoughts quickly on the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine. Are you at liberty to give your personal thoughts on that? Like a fucking another country invading someone else in the 2022s, 23s?
Yeah.
What the actual?
I mean, obviously I have a very, very strong opinion on that, given that my country was invaded under similar circumstances.
Put your PhD to be hat on as an observer of that low. Like, were you shocked when you first heard about that?
Yes, like everyone else, but I guess that shock wears off pretty quickly when you start realising that there's far bigger machinations that are at play that are decades old, decades long. And this is something I explore in the podcast, and I've had a number of prominent guests, including senior Norwegian military people, senior British analysts, etc., talk about and I've had Ukrainians on the podcast. I've had a Russian girl from St. Petersburg on the podcast talking about how the Russians view the war, and the reason I say it what's black and white is that it's an immoral, unethical war, and it's an illegal war. It's an illegal invasion. There's no question of that. But what I'm looking at in my PhD is to what extent upstream causes make certain outcomes predictable and almost uncertain. Almost certain. And I think that's something that is probably relevant in this war. It's probably relevant in every other war. But my particular focus in the PhD is more on the kind of individual soldier level, on to what extent, how much moral degradation occurs in a war, and therefore can we truly hold soldiers morally accountable for their behaviours in war.
I found it very interesting, the whole special military operation to go and rid the Nazis from the Ukraine. I'm like, fucking come on, mate. You can come up with a better cover story, can you?
But the people believe it.
But they believe it. That's the whole thing. So the whole upstream thing that you're talking about, what goes on in their narrative and their ethics and their culture to think that that's okay.
And chances are, if I was in Russia, I'd believe it too, and most of us would too. Right? And that's the moment your identity is under threat, you will believe just about anything. And we know this through social science research over decades of how much how easily it is to comply, or how easily people will comply with orders or views that are in any objective sense ridiculous, but we're just people.
Just like the order that came down, it was like, you're not eating the sausages, put the fucking trunk back on and start walking.
15K to go.
That is a ridiculous request, Captain Turner. I don't think I'm going to participate in that
Say
little
that
walk.
again, motherfucker. Maz, Luke, I promise we were going to take this podcast to the next level. Brother, you have come in and absolutely done that. Thank you so much, mate. That was excellent. Final thoughts?
Maz, can I just say, mate, obviously, one of my best mates and, a constant inspiration to me in my life. So, mate, thanks very much for coming in and sharing your story and letting our audience know, from the perspective of someone who's still currently in, but, been through an amazing journey, mate. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, gents.
Please, ladies and gents, if you enjoyed that, share and share alike. So many people need to hear that stuff. Good on you, Maz.
Cheers, Maz.
And certainly, Dubs, make sure you put Maz's little podcast down there, because those that like all that geopolitical upstream stuff, he's your man.
Yeah.
See you next time. Thanks, team.